Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. Welcome back to the Sacred Space with me, your host, Preetha Lal, as we spend some time reading the book Eternal Values for a Changing Society by the late Srimad Swami Ranganathananda ji. As you are aware, if you're following this podcast, Swami Ranganathananda was the 13th president of the Ramakrishna Matan Mission, but he was so much more. He was a scholar par excellence, a guru, a guide, a spiritual ambassador, a philosopher, and a teacher. This multi-volume treatise that I am reading to you through this podcast is a true testament to the breadth of his knowledge and the depth of his wisdom. Today, we will begin reading a new chapter and we will break this out into 3 episodes. In this episode, we will read the Swami's take on the spiritual aspirations and activities of the people of India. He begins with a discussion on the immensity and variety of India, talks about the scientific basis of Indian spirituality, and then goes into Swami Vivekananda's path-breaking philosophy of the innate divinity of the human being. This is followed up by a synthesis of the teachings of the Gita and the Upanishads. We will end this particular episode with an introduction into the science and art of yoga. It may be of interest for you to know that this chapter that I will be reading in 3 episodes that the Swami has titled as The Spiritual Life of the Indian People was a lecture delivered by him at the Tokyo University in Japan on September 30th, 1958, and also at the Naprostek Museum Hall in Prague, Czechoslovakia on June 23rd, 1961. Let us begin. The Spiritual Life of the Indian People. Introduction. I have been asked to speak on the spiritual life of the Indian people. That you have chosen this subject is indicative of your keen desire to have a closer insight into the life and thought of the people of a country from which you of Japan have derived a large part of your own spiritual life. And no better subject could have been chosen for this purpose, for religion has formed and still forms the keynote of the music of Indian national life, and no understanding of India will be adequate or proper which does not impart an insight into the spiritual life of her people. I shall endeavor to give here a picture of the spiritual aspirations and activities of the people of my country. India, its immensity and variety. 2 things I would request you to bear in mind constantly. 1. The vastness of India in size and population. 2. Its long history running into over 5,000 years. These 2 facts have imparted an amazing diversity of Indian culture and life, from the snowy peaks of the Himalayas in the north to the Land's End, the Cape Comorin as it was called then, or Kanyakumari, or the Indian Ocean in the far south, a length of about 2,000 miles, from the jungles of Assam on the border of Burma or Myanmar in the east to the deserts of Rajasthan and the beautiful valley of Kashmir on the border of Pakistan in the west, a distance of over 1,800 miles. India contains a wide variety of climate, flora, fauna, of cultural language and human types. This vast land and its people have the pressure of the stimulus of over 5,000 years of history and tradition behind them. A long history during which the national mind has had the opportunity to experience life from various angles and various levels, prosperity and adversity, victory and defeat, freedom and subjection, knowledge and ignorance, illumination and darkness. The people had been taught one great lesson by their earliest leaders and thinkers, namely, that the object of life is not pleasure or pain, but knowledge through a dispassionate study of both. The philosophic temper of the Indian people. The people of India have more or less accepted this outlook on life. The thinking people more and the ordinary people less, for which the land became known abroad as a land of philosophers, for that attitude is the characteristic of a scientific and philosophic mind. Equipped with such a mind and temper, an individual achieves a greater and deeper measure of maturity, of knowledge and outlook, the longer his life and the more varied his experience. Without this temper of reflection, long life means only long existence, nothing more. It just means a repetition of the first round of experience, not capable of producing maturity of outlook and chastening of the mind and heart. The English poet Wordsworth referred to this chastening process when he sang from the lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey, and the Swami quotes, "For I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue." Unquote. This is true not only of individuals, but also of nations and cultures. Cultures with violence embedded in their hearts represent the failure to capture this maturity of philosophic temper. Fortunately for India, her teachers and leaders, from the great sages of the Upanishads and Rama and Krishna of the prehistoric past, through Buddha and Shankara of the historic period, to Ramakrishna and Vivekananda of our own times, have helped her people to capture this mood and temper, which accounts for the compassion and the humanism in her culture and her spirit of tolerance and peace. The Upanishads and the science of religion. It was the great sages of the Upanishads who first expounded the science and philosophy of people's spiritual life. This was about 500 to 1000 years before Buddha. Religious acts of worship and ritual, the religious beliefs of myth and legend, obtained even before the Upanishads in the early Vedic and the pre-Vedic or Mohenjo-daro periods. In fact, such expressions of religions are coextensive with human existence itself. They characterize the life of all people, from the primitive to the advanced. But questioning these religious acts and beliefs, bringing a meaning out of them through comparison and contrast, and grading them into stages according to their spiritual content, in short, the development of science of religion, of a full psychology and philosophy of religion, these were first achieved in the Upanishads or Vedanta, and later in various other limited formulations. The practice of meditation, sitting with the eyes closed and mind indrawn, was prevalent in India 5,000 years ago during the Mohenjo-daro period, which has yielded through excavations the statue of a god sitting in a yoga pose with eyes closed and mind indrawn and surrounded by tame and wild animals, much like the image of Shiva of the later ages. The Rig Veda largely depicts a religion of worship and prayer and praise of the various gods of its pantheon in the context of a close kinship of nature, gods, and people. It is a religion of this worldliness aiming at health, wealth, and welfare of people and society. The worshipper keeps his eyes open and directs them to the gods of wind, rain, and sunshine in the sky. It was marked by simplicity and spontaneity. These two forms of religion became accepted by Vedanta as two valid expressions of the religious impulse. All the higher religions of the world contain these two phases, often living apart and unreconciled, with the claims of this world standing in sharp contrast with those of the world beyond. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Hinduism have these two elements in them, the social and the trans-social or mystical, in varying proportions, with a rule of thumb method of adjustment between them. According to the preponderance of these two elements, the world religions can be broadly classified as mystical or non-mystical. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Christianity belong to the mystical type, while Judaism, Islam, and Zoroastrianism belong to the non-mystical. In the same country, there may be both types of religions present, like Shintoism and Buddhism in Japan, and Confucianism and Taoism in China, with mutual adjustment based on social expediency rather than philosophic necessity. The innate divinity of the human being. The Upanishads carried the development of the mystical religion to its highest point when they discovered the real self in the human being behind this apparent self. The former immortal, ever pure and ever free, while the latter finite, mortal, and bound. And they declared the great truth that the human is divine. which was echoed centuries later in the declaration of Buddha that nirvana is the birthright of every being, and still later in that of the New Testament. And the Swami quotes, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," unquote. If divinity is the innermost core of the human being, the path to it lies through the withdrawal of the senses and the mind from the world of sensate experience and turning their energies inward in a supreme effort of concentration. By such inward penetration, a person achieves realization of his true nature, the non-dual, immortal, changeless, and pure Atman behind his apparent self of changeful individuality. This is the well-known yoga technique and achievement as expounded in Vedanta, of which one of the most glorious examples was Buddha. The spiritual unity of the within and the without of nature. But the Upanishads did not stop there. They asked the important question as to the true nature of the world outside as well. Their knowledge of the divine within helped them to penetrate into the nature of the world without. For, as Eddington tells us, at the farthest limits of our knowledge of the external world, we realize that consciousness is the first and most direct thing in experience. All else is remote inference. Or, as Jeans tells us, in the last resort, those waves which we describe as light waves, and those other waves which we interpret as the waves of an electron and proton, also consist of knowledge about photons, electrons, and protons, respectively. The answer of the Upanishads received to that question raised the thought of Vedanta to supreme philosophic heights. They discovered divinity at the core of the world as well as they had earlier discovered it at the core of the human soul. The universe, to their purified vision, revealed itself as spiritual through and through. Nature was divine and human was divine. Thus, God became the unity of the human and nature. Their duality was relegated to partial, limited knowledge revealed through the prism of the senses and the sense-bound mind. When viewed without these human limitations, the world is divine. This conclusion, the Upanishads couched in some of the most pithy and majestic utterances, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma, or all this is verily Brahman, the spiritual absolute, Ekam Eva Advityam, only one without a second, Neha Nanasti Kinchana, there is not the least duality here, I am Atma Brahma, the self is Brahman, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, Brahman is truth, knowledge, and infinity, and Brahmaiva Devam Amritam, all this universe is Brahman, the immortal. Yoga as the science and art of the spiritual life. Thus, the Upanishads bridged the gulf between the human being and the nature by proclaiming the solidarity and oneness of all existence. This one idea precluded the maintenance of the whole host of those sharp distinctions between this world and the next, the non-mystical and the mystical, reason and faith, life and religion, as also between religion and religion, as well as faith and faith. It was left to Sri Krishna a few centuries later to gather up these apparently diverse spiritual elements in a sweeping synthesis of a comprehensive spirituality in the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita achieves the synthesis of the mystical and non-mystical religious elements, of the Shintoistic and Buddhistic elements of all religions, in a comprehensive spirituality based on the metaphysics of the Upanishads. This is the yoga of the Gita as different from the Patanjali and other yogas. Yoga in the Gita is the science and art of spiritual life. In the light of this total vision, the Gita discovered two different manifestations of the spiritual life. One in the form of social ethics, which the Gita broadly designates as dharma, and the other in the form of trans-social spiritual striving, which it designates as amrita. In the first, the individual learns to chasten his emotions and thoughts through the discharging of his family and social responsibilities and experiences the delights thereof. The spiritual education gives him an experience of self-transcendence within the context of his social life itself. arising from the limited, truncated ego to the largeness and fullness of a social personality. The only austerity he is called upon to undertake at this stage is the austerity of expansion of his interests and affections. It is the austerity involved in the love and service. It is always sought in the context of delight and joy. He is required to cultivate active virtues, for manliness is the end sought to be achieved in this sphere. When his social personality has become fully developed, when he has achieved manliness, he is called upon to enter the next stage of spiritual education through a direct confrontation with the divinity within. This harder path becomes easy to tread after the achievement of manliness in the earlier stage. There is a change in forms and techniques here, consequent to the change in the field of action. Calm endurance of external circumstances with a view to fitting the mind to penetrate the internal core of his being becomes a virtue to be developed. The emphasis shifts from active to passive virtues, from action to contemplation, from love of society to love of solitude, without, however, involving any hatred of society as such. This training imparts a depth to the human personality, a stability and strength to the individual's character and tranquility, and poise to his bearing, for he is reaching out to the center of all power and energy within him, his true self. Every step gained in this direction makes him more peaceful, more joyful, more compassionate, and more efficient. When at last he gains the vision of the self, he becomes illumined, with all bondages of the heart destroyed and all finiteness transcended. He realizes an infinite individuality, the culmination of the process that had started with education through social ethics. Herein is the achievement of the full meaning of the Delphic exhortation, "Man, know thyself." The person of spiritual vision perceives equality everywhere, realizing the self in all beings and all beings in the self, says the Gita, chapter 6, verse 29. The Swami further quotes from the Isha Upanishad, "One who perceives all beings in the self and the self in all beings will not, in virtue of that realization, hate anyone or practice dissimulation. When to that knowing sage who has realized supreme unity, all beings become the self, what delusion, what grief can afflict him?" Unity of action and contemplation. Thus, the Gita gathered up the twofold Vedic Dharma, which is representative of the twofold forms of all religions and social and transsocial, or the mystical Dharma and Amrita, in a comprehensive statement of human spiritual life. Vedanta very aptly designates these two forms of all world religions as Pravritti Dharma and Nivritti Dharma, religion of social action and religion of inward contemplation. Vedanta holds that every man and woman has to pass through the discipline of these two dharmas in order to achieve spiritual fulfillment. Both social ethics and mystical spirituality become the earlier and later phases of one continuous spiritual education of the human soul. There is not and never can be, in the view of Vedanta, any conflict between them. Conflict arises only when one takes a limited view of the scope of human life, or when one refuses to move to higher levels of life expression. In short, conflict arises from stagnation at any particular level. The Upanishads describe life as a dynamic movement, and they use the symbol of the chariot with its horses and driver to illustrate this dynamic nature. They discovered a goal to all this movement, physical, social, and spiritual, and called that goal the achievement of freedom and fullness, self-realization, or God-realization. Acharya Shankara, the greatest philosopher of India, refers to this twofold form of religion in the introduction to his commentary on the Gita. The Vedic Dharma is verily twofold, characterized by pravritti, social action, and nivritti, inward contemplation, designed to promote the order in the world. This twofold dharma has in view the true social welfare and spiritual emancipation of all beings. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and presence here today as we conclude the first of the three-part series of the readings on the spiritual life of the Indian people. In the next episodes, we will pick up where we left off and read the Swami's words on the 4 yogas, the preeminence of bhakti or devotion, the evolution of the Sanatana Dharma, and the worship of divine incarnations. But for now, I take your leave and I wish you well. Namaste.